A language is a systematic means of communication involving written, spoken, and/or physical symbols and words, and it's an essential part of human conduct. Imagine pulling up to a McDonald's and trying to order a cheeseburger without communicating. Yeah, absolutely impossible. Filipino is one of the hundreds of languages that exists today. It is native to the Philippines, and as we are speaking right now, this language is slowly fading away. In fact, it's not only Filipino, but all of the native Philippine languages. No, it's not dying. Not yet. And they won't be going extinct anytime soon. But at this rate, in a couple hundred years, it may just end up like Latin, which literally got L+ ratioed by every single other language. The Philippines has two official languages, Filipino, which is the native tongue, and English, which was most likely adopted from back when the Americans colonized the Philippines. Most Filipinos still use their native tongues today, I included. I just use English in my videos so I don't sound like an alien to the 80% of people around the globe. But even so, some people end up being more fluent in English and speak more English than Filipino. And unfortunately, I'm ashamed to say that I'm part of that demographic. Not to an extreme, but still. Now, this is in part due to how the Filipino language works and is used. The use of English loanwords is extremely common to the point people say fuck it and dual wield English and Filipino simultaneously, resulting in the creation of Taglish, which borrows the entire English vocabulary and sometimes even grammar while using Filipino as well. Basically, code switching. Also, Filipino is a bit difficult to both read and enunciate, with an abundance of repeating syllables and vowels on top of being a tonal language, which basically means words like suka and suka mean completely different things. So sometimes, people just weave in a little bit of English to make things easier. But that's not all. In my case, a reason to my greater fluency in English is my upbringing and the environment that I grew up in. You see, in public schools, the main medium of communication is usually Filipino, but I was lucky enough to be able to attend a private school. And in more prestigious environments such as these, the use of English is usually the standard. Now, using English as a standard language in education is not inherently a bad thing, but the problem is, at least in the way my school did things, is that the use of English was not only encouraged, but required. And the use of any other language, Filipino included, resulted in us having to pay a 5 peso fine per word. In fact, they even encouraged this Speak English 24 hours policy to be implemented outside of school. Like, what the fuck, Philippines? I thought you were supposed to be on my side. They sugarcoat this by saying that the money will be given to charity, which is believable because my school has a reputation for philanthropy. But nevertheless, it still made me mad that they implemented such a rule. Even my measly 5th grade mind knew that it was unreasonable to completely ban us from speaking Filipino other than during Filipino classes. After all, we're in the Philippines. We're all Juans and Marias here. Why is our freedom to speak our national language being restricted? I was quite the stickler for the rules back then, and this was the one and only rule that I not only disregarded, but actively wanted to disobey. Honestly, if I go back to physical classes and they decide to re-implement this, I'm not paying a single peso, because this kind of treatment to our national language only contributes to its already steady decline. And I don't know about everyone else, but they basically dropped teaching us anything about Filipino grammar after the 6th grade. And then for grade 7 and 8, they make us read Ibong Adarda and f***ing Balagtas. F***ing Balagtas. To anyone who has read that, you know how hard it is to understand. My grandmother is at least 4 times more fluent at Filipino than me, is gigabrained when it comes to literature stuff, and even she finds Balagtas difficult to read. And they expect 14-year-olds to understand this? And guess what? We're being taught subject-verb agreement for about the 6th time in English, because repetition is the key. If that's the case, what the fuck happened to Filipino? They're teaching us so many different parts of English, even down to stuff like, I don't know, pronoun antecedent agreement, and here in Filipino, we're stuck with whatever we had in 6th grade. To cut Filipino some slack, the subject does go beyond just the language and has to touch on Filipino culture and whatnot. But let me ask you this, how do you expect us to learn anything from this if we can't understand 70% of what you're teaching us in whatever the frick we're reading? I remember bringing this topic up during free time in discourse with my English teacher, who, God bless his soul, he is a wonderful person, said that maybe the curriculum doesn't teach us much Filipino because, you know, we are Filipinos, so we should know how to speak Filipino.
Bullshit.
You think we can learn pronoun antecedent agreement from the streets of Britain? Yeah, mate, didn't think so. Same thing. We can't be expected to understand deep-ass Filipino literature if they refuse to teach us anything past the 6th grade. Maybe you've seen this video from Asian Boss about Filipinos not being able to speak purely in their own language. No one could even come close, always accidentally code switching or weaving in a loan word or two. Now, I don't think it's entirely a bad thing that people do this. After all, language is arbitrary, so it changes through time. So if the use of language has evolved in this manner, then so be it. But completely eliminating the use of English loanwords can cut the speaker's proficiency in half, since they're so common. This just goes to show how little effort is put in both teaching and learning the native language. However, there was one thing in particular that was mentioned in this video that we need to shed light on.
Kapag nag-English ka, parang mas mataas yung level mo kesa sa dun sa hindi nag-English.
And as a fellow Filipinian, I can confirm, there seems to be this stigma around these languages, English being the premier language, while Filipino becomes somewhat of the commoner's language. And to a certain extent, that is kind of true. English is more widely spoken throughout the globe, which allows us to more easily bridge language barriers and opens up a large amount of opportunities, while Filipino is only really usable in this country. But the segregation of these languages almost feels like a class divide. Of course, that's not entirely true, but sometimes people are even considered lower and less educated if they can only speak Filipino. A similar video exists on Korean, but I think they do a better job of getting through the challenge. Except for this guy, he straight up didn't even try. However, as someone learning Korean, I did notice one thing. The use of English is exclusively for loanwords only. And as far as I know, these loanwords were only used for nouns. Koreans also don't mix in literal English grammar, but I think that's because the grammatical structure in Korean doesn't allow it. But in Filipino, people even use verbs. I could say something like, isort mo nga yung mga files sa computer mo, and people would understand me. I borrowed the verb sort, the noun file in its plural form, and computer but spelled more Filipino. The latter two words are a bit more forgivable as they are more modern in usage. However, to sort? Now it's completely possible to say ayusin instead, but isort is also a quote-unquote valid tagless usage that I myself have at least used once in my life. Just a few hours ago, I even heard my grandmother say, ihit mo nga to, rather than iinit. Even fluent speakers of Filipino do this, which again is not inherently bad, but still. How a language will evolve is up to the speakers. So if Filipino will end up evolving in this manner where a lot of English is used, then again, so be it. There's nothing I can do to stop it. But what we need to do is at the very least put equal, if not more value in our own language and culture. We have such a stupidly strong sense of colonial mentality and some sort of negative predisposition for our sariling atin, which is in its entirety a whole different topic for another video. The problem with us Filipinos is that our own biggest hater is also ourselves. Binabaliwala na lang natin palagi ang ating sariling lingwahe at kultura. Minsan, pakiramdam ko na mas sikat pa ang Blackpink kaysa sa OPM natin. Nakaka-disappoint lang. Kaya nga, kung totoong proud tayong maging Filipino, ipakita natin. Wag lang nating gawing pagsasabi. Mahalin at ipagmalaki ang sariling lingwahe, kultura at kasaysayan. Hindi lamang ang pangalang Filipino. Muli, ito si Red. Salamat sa inyong pagpapanood. Paalam!